1, 2, 3.
It's time to talk fantasy football. Get your squad ready for this week's action with Frank and the Purple Rain crew. Now, live from the Fantasy Wire studios and home of the Casual Conversation podcast, it's the Purple Rain Fantasy Show.
What is up? Welcome to the Purple Rain Show, proud member of the Full-Time Fantasy Network. You're listening to the home of the Casual Conversation Fantasy Football podcast. We are in week 12 of the NFL and fantasy season. I'm your host, Frank B. You can find me on Twitter at FantasyWireHQ, online at thefantasyfootballwire.com. Bookmark it. I will have starts and sits, Fantasy Pro rankings, risk and reward players, player comparison. Everything is set up and live on Thursday night. Right before kickoff, I'll have the website updated. So lock it in, bookmark it for the season. You can reference everything you need fantasy-wise there. And you can follow the Purple Rain Show and the crew on Twitter at Purple Rain Show. And online at purplerainshow.com. I'm pretty excited today. I apologize last week. I talked about work-wise, full-time, real-life job sucks, but I took on more territory and work there, so I got to stay late. It's really throwing a wrench into recording podcasts, and it's a little difficult depending on the job flow each week, so I had to cut it. I'm trying to keep it at worst every other week, but no more than that. So if I can do week to week like normal, I'll hit it. If not, it's going to be in every other week, but I want to get it in, especially gearing up for fantasy playoffs coming up soon. It's a big, big thing. Whether you're in, whether you're out, you don't have much time. There's a lot to get to. So today's episode, we're going to talk about some fantasy advice. We're going to get into some strategy coming down the stretch, take a look at my teams. And then also a heads up, we're going to have a podcast for the holiday week coming up for Thanksgiving. Thanksgiving, you're sitting around eating turkey, being a fat ass, watching the games, all in good fun, of course. Maybe you're dealing with the in-laws, what have you. But typically, I mean, we're all guys for the most part. Anybody, guys or girls. You sit around, you go, man, I got to get in shape. New Year's, I'm gonna do something. I'm gonna get healthy. I'm gonna change something, exercise, what have you. So this week we're gonna do a podcast. Myself and my man Dennis Colatzos, my guest spot on his radio show every Thursday. But me and Dennis are big gym guys. We're not meatheads. You know, we're not throwing weights around like a bunch of morons in there, but we like to work out, relatively healthy. And we're just going to do a podcast. We're going to talk about some ways to get into fitness, weightlifting, diet, whatever it is. If you're a newbie, if you've been into it a long time and you want to change it up, just a fun pod to do. We're going to talk NFL, of course. We're going to talk about the Thanksgiving slate, a day's slate of games. We're going to talk about fantasy, of course. We'll get some Ravens talk too, but hit that podcast up next week. It's going to be really good. I cannot wait to get that on for you guys. And then today, let's get started with some fantasy stuff. I want to get into the state of my fantasy teams here. Complete transparency. What are my teams doing this year? So I'm looking at my teams here. I'm in a couple of leagues. I did a couple best ball leagues, a couple regular standards, a dynasty. So I'm not going to jump in and break down my whole rosters, but let's just go into my standings. League 1, I'm in second place, 7-4. It's a league at my gym. Pretty fun. Everybody's hardcore. I organized it with another guy. We set this league up for people that will not quit halfway through, will not give up, will not ghost rosters, and are pretty competitive. So that's a fun league. It's a log jam down the board from fourth place, but it's a real fun league. 7-4. I'm doing pretty good in there. My Purple Rain Show league, where I should be doing somewhat decent, 4-7. 4-7. I'm sucking on that one. I cannot catch a break in that league. It's a tough one. Whole Purple Rain Show crew is in there. Pretty competitive, real fun league. We got it split 2 divisions, so we'll see how that finishes out at the end of the season. And then my Scott Fish Bowl, the SFB 9. Super excited to get in that league this year. I could not wait. Really fun, completely different, unique style of scoring, and everything. It's an emphasis on tight ends, first downs. I mean, it's a whole different kind of strategy. It's really fun. It's tough. My record is 5-6.
Ooh, here we go.
But the most interesting stat is that I'm like top 10 in scoring of 1,200 teams, and I'm 5-6. I can't catch a break on these rosters or the lineups. I got a funky roster on that one. That was a tough draft. But man, I gotta bring myself out. I gotta squeak in the playoffs somehow in this league. I got like 2 wins back to back, I think. So if I can stack some wins and close out the season, hopefully I'll be okay. Best ball with full-time fantasy. What am I doing in there? I haven't looked at that for a while. See, with best ball, you kind of forget, and then you go, wait a second, I haven't checked on that for a while. Best ball, if you don't know, is a real cool concept. You do a draft, you draft a huge team, and what's nice is through the season, you don't have to set lineups. You just, highest scoring players that are on your team are counted for the week. And it's really nice. I like that quite a bit. Bye weeks don't matter. Injuries don't matter. You just set it and forget it. Check on it occasionally, every week, however you want to do it, and see where you stand. So the draft early, a lot of strategy in that too, because you're setting this team for the whole season. So you better really nail that draft up front, because it's got to carry you the whole season. You don't know who's going to break out, who's going to suck, who's going to drop off, come into their own. Let me see. Where am I looking here? 10-1, best league. Now this, see, like I said, you don't know how your team's going to play out, so the draft is pretty critical. But on my draft, I grabbed Lamar Jackson, Aaron Rodgers, Nick Foles, McCaffrey, Aaron Jones, Mark Ingram, Devin Singletary, Raquel Armstead backing up Fournette. I figured he'd get hurt early, but he didn't. Elijah McGuire, I don't know what I was thinking with that one. Cooper Kupp, Michael Gallup, Curtis Samuel, Marquise Brown, Taylor Gabriel, Nelson Aguilar, Corey Davis, Keelan Cole, Devin Funchess, George Kittle, Jordan Reed, Justin Tucker, Matt Bryant, Saints and Packers defense. So the strategy in that is you want high ceiling guys, and that was how I approached that draft. Like I said, if you have not done a best ball league, you should seriously try one and give it a run, because it is pretty fun. The draft is the best part, and at least looking back to lock that team in and say, man, I really sucked, or I really nailed it. I think I did. I mean, I'm 10-1. I think I did pretty good on that draft. I missed some few guys, but definitely going to get more into that next season without a doubt. But for this week, let's talk about some fantasy strategy and some advice. Approaching the playoffs. Playoffs? What are you doing for the playoffs? Trades are over. You're done trading. You're not getting trade offers. You're not throwing trades out there anymore. So you got a couple weeks to get your team in check if you got to make a run, if you got to hold your ground. The key, more or less, is your waiver wire. What's going on with the waivers? We talked about this in a while back, week 1, week 2 maybe. You can't window shop. Don't window shop on these waiver players. A player comes off, look at Brian Hill, the running back, filling in for Freeman. He got all the hype, one of the top waiver ads, and he busts. So if you added him, you put him on your team, who did you drop to make room? Did you drop somebody decent or somebody that just pissed you off the prior week? Now you got to scramble to hopefully get that guy back. You want to carry Hill? No. So those kind of decisions can totally derail a couple weeks. I mean, it can really sink you as far as depth. If you're in a pinch with a bye week and you got a flex guy, you've got to pick the right waiver. And it's really hard because this season's been pretty odd with the bye weeks, the matchups that have been thrown in the bye weeks for your key guys. I think that's probably what my number one problem was this year, is I didn't really account for bye weeks. And the bye weeks, when they came, the guys I had to fill in, the matchups sucked, or they just didn't show up. So that really, I think my leagues that I'm doing the worst in, that's probably a big part of it, because I shopped a little too much, or maybe I went in on one guy. Stat-wise, stats have been really deceiving this year too, because there's been like 3 to 4 weeks in a row. You look at these matchups and you're like, okay, team A is giving up this percent against the pass. They're ranked this against, their defense is ranked this against the run. And you look at the stats and you go, okay, well, is it just 1 week of stats, or is this a body of work? And you look at it and you go, yeah, it's a body of work. I'm plugging player A in. You plug him in and he sucks. He does nothing. So really, really frustrating. It's really hard to get around. So this next couple weeks here, this window is key to getting you in to the playoffs or to holding down the fort so you can get a bye week, what have you. But you got to set the lineups the right way. You got to hit the waiver wire, be choosy, make sure you're getting the right guy that is the right fit for your team. And the flex plays, I think, are pretty key week in and week out. If you got your ones and twos in, the bye weeks will be ended up here. But your flex spot's going to be key if you're in a 2 flex league, 3, whatever it is. Look at your opponent. Who are they playing in the flex? Is your guy better than them? Does your guy have the best ceiling? A lot of strategy, but I think those are probably the 2 main things looking forward down the road. And going back to the waivers, if you're looking at players on the waivers starting this week, after you listen to this podcast, look at the rest of the season schedule. And for me, I try to ask myself 2 questions when I'm hitting waivers every week. A, does this guy's rest of season schedule shape up good? Does this, fantasy playoff schedule weeks 14, 15, 16 look good? Is question 1. If that isn't good, I'm not even going to touch the guy if they look like crap or they look too tough. And then question 2, is this guy better than anybody I've got on my team? Because if you say no, why are you going after this guy, right? Are you doing it just to window shop or to pick somebody that flashed in the pan that you've seen on Twitter or ESPN or what have you for the past, couple days? So I try to ask myself that, is this guy going to make my team better? Is he better than anybody I currently have? And if the question is or a question, the answer is a no, I'm not picking him. I'm not taking him. So that would be my best advice for this week and the rest of the season. So let's get into some news, notes, injury report right now. Marlon Mack, Colts, hand injury. Man, he was killing it. He had one of his best outings of the year before he left with a broken hand. So in his spot, you're looking at Jordan Wilkins, and Jonathan Williams look pretty decent too. I don't know who is getting the call there, but those would probably be your top waiver ads this week. Auden Tate for the Bengals. Concussion and a cervical strain. Wide receiver. Carted off the field. Pretty scary against the Raiders, but he gave the thumbs up. So he is okay, but that's a mess offensively there. There's no sign of AJ Green coming back this year. Tyler Boyd, Alex Erickson, Stanley Morgan. Oh, if it's a 401k or what, you're pretty screwed there. Tyreek Hill, hamstring. These hamstring injuries, look at Adam Thielen. He's missed the game, came back, sucked. Bye week, hopefully he can come back. Tyreek Hill, the hamstring injuries are always cautious. You don't know how the guy's going to perform when he gets back, if it's 1 week or 2. Kind of seems like a 2 to 3 week window, in my opinion, for whether you can really trust him again. But Tyreek Hill, obviously, he's got too much ceiling every week. If he's playing, you're probably locking him in, but I don't think he's going to be out. Damian Williams, rib injury for the Chiefs. I just got this guy a couple weeks back because I was in need of running back help, and now what the hell? Rib injury. They're pretty tricky too, depending on how bad they are. Probably not going to know more till the team releases his results, of course, and that'll be top secret as every team is. But without Williams, you're looking at Darrell Williams and LaShawn McCoy. Manuel Sanders, another rib injury. Deebo Samuel is your guy there if he is out. James Conner with the shoulder. Hard to say what's going on there. He's been dinged up and in and out of the lineup, leaving games early. You're looking at Jalen Samuels there, the Trey Edmonds. Juju Smith-Schuster with a concussion and a knee. I think the Steelers are bringing in some receivers. Who did I see on Twitter? I just saw this the other day. It was the Ohio State guy. I thought that flamed out with the Raiders. I can't remember his name. Anyway, you're looking at him. Deontay Johnson's been terrible. Mason Rudolph, James Washington. Steelers for receivers, you might as well look elsewhere. But Mitchell Trubisky, the Bears, hip pointer. He'll be fine, but my God. Other than that, some guys that may come back this week, or week 12, I'm saying, hopefully. T.Y. Hilton, Brandon Cooks, Sterling Shepard, Evan Ingram, George Kittle. They could be back this week or week 12, hopefully. So they'll help your lineups, but just be cautious with them. You don't really know how good they're going to be when they come back, if they're still banged up, how much they can get in game wise. So I'd caution it there. Game time, week 11. Let's run through some matchups. We'll go by the game skids, and we'll talk about players, either that I'm getting a lot of talk on Twitter, questions, DMs, lineup questions and advice. The locks, we all know our locks every week with receivers, quarterbacks, running backs, our wide receiver 1s and 2s. We're locking them in. Patrick Mahomes, all those guys. Chubb, you're not messing with them. You leave them in there. But Jacoby Brissett, he had the big game in Houston week 7. He killed it. 326 yards, 4 TDs. I don't think Houston's pass defense has changed much since then. They allow the 6th most fantasy points per game to quarterbacks. So even if Hilton's out, I think Brissett can still get it done. Jonathan Williams, we talked about him with the injury filling in for Mac. I think if he's going to be in, I'd plug him in. Absolutely. The Texans have held, starting running backs to an average of 39 yards and 0 touchdowns. But if it's him, I'm plugging him in maybe in a deep flex spot or a streamer if I've got to play a back. Jordan Wilkins, same thing. I think he'd start, looking at pecking order, I think he'd start over Williams, but Wilkins should be the top priority this week. Carlos Hyde, Texans. The Colts have tightened up against the run. Just ask Leonard Fournette. Lions and Redskins. Darius Geis. He's been splitting with AP. I'm guessing Geis is going to see about, I don't know, you give him 10 more snaps, you give him 5 more carries, right? Against a bad defense, bad run defense in the Lions, you got to lock him in a flex spot. I think he could be a nice play in the flex this week. Jeff Driscoll, Lions quarterback. He's averaged 25.5 fantasy points past 2 weeks. Now he gets to face the Redskins defense that is just terrible across the board. So Lions don't have much of a running game besides Driscoll's legs. You never know who they're going to plug in. And speaking of that, I think Matt Patricia is going to the team each week, getting a collective order of fantasy lineups. Whoever the Lions running back is, he goes the other way. Bo Scarborough, out of nowhere last week. First ever touchdown. I mean, he's an Alabama guy, so he's got the pedigree, right? But he's out attempted the next closest Lions running back by 11 carries. So the last 3 running backs to face off the Redskins have averaged, say, 20 points. You lock them in, but buyer beware with any Lions running back. Dolphins, Browns, Devontae Parker, breakout season. Breakout. He's been steady, consistent, getting targets, producing week in, week out. He had 7 catches for 135 on 10 targets against Buffalo in week 11. He scored at least 11 PPR points in 7 games in a row, either a touchdown or 100 receiving yards in 5. Trustworthy in my book. I'm locking him in each week. Jarvis Landry, he's got a hip injury or some kind of hip deal, but he's always reliable. 11 plus points in each of his last 4 games. I think he makes it 5 in a revenge game against the Dolphins. They've allowed 8 touchdowns and a league high 14.9 yards per catch to the slot. Landry, flex him out. Kareem Hunt, he's splitting with Nick Chubb. He's still getting nice volume as a pass catcher, so I'm going to put him in there. He's had more points than Chubb in 2 straight games. So as a flex, I like him as well. Running back 2, 3 if you're needing to throw him in there. Panthers and Saints, Kyle Allen. The magic is out. Clock has struck midnight for Minshew. Now it's striking for Allen. Complete disaster against the Falcons. 50 passes for 325, 0 touchdowns, and 4 interceptions. Oh yeah, 9 picks over the past 4 games with 3 in that span. That's terrible. Greg Olsen, he had his first solid game in a while against the Packers. 8 catches for 17.8 fantasy points. But next up, he's got the Falcons. Jared Cook went off on them last week. I don't see why Greg Olsen can't do the same. Speaking of Jared Cook, he's been pretty solid in recent weeks. So he's had double-digit points in each of his last 4 games, and that is including a touchdown in 3 of those. So I like him against the Panthers. I know the Panthers are tough on tight ends, but they really, if you look at their schedule, they really haven't faced a bunch of really good ones. So I think Cook he's got some potential this week. Broncos and Bills. Josh Allen, Denver is allowing the 3rd fewest fantasy points to QB. So Allen is going to have to get it done either by his legs or buying time in the pocket, making it, maybe he runs in for a touchdown. I think that's the way he gets his points this week. John Brown, highest scoring player in all of fantasy. John Brown. Remember when John Brown was just boom or bust? You put him in, he sucks. You bench him, he goes off. And that was John Brown for 2 straight seasons. This year, he's killing it. The wideout has been held out of the end zone in 7 of 9 games prior to last week. Denver allows the 4th fewest points to wide receivers this year. You're locking him in no matter what. He's John Brown. He's killing it. Devin Singletary. Broncos shut down Dalvin Cook last week. That was pretty surprising. I did not see that coming. I thought Dalvin Cook would get his. Maybe he wouldn't go completely off, but they contained him, so I don't really feel too good about Singletary this week. Tim Patrick, wide receiver playing opposite of Cortland Sutton. He's one. I scooped him off waivers in like 3 leagues. If he's going to be the number 2 or even the 3 in the slot, I think he's got a little chemistry going. I think he's got some potential. So if you could, I don't know if you want to play him this week, but keep an eye on him maybe next week, week after. See what he does. I think he may turn into something. Bucks and the Falcons. Winston, obviously, Mr. Interception. He's always going to have more positive volume, than any other quarterback. Calvin Ridley, he went off last week. Carolina set up for another big game against the Bucks. Their defense is allowed 12 touchdowns and the 3rd most fantasy points to receivers lined out wide. So I love Ridley this week. Matt Ryan, pretty underwhelming since his return from injury, but Tampa Bay secondary is terrible. He ought to go off on them. Chris Godwin, after averaging 149.3 over 3 games prior to his bye week, he's averaged only 56.25 since coming back from the bye. What is going on with Godwin? It's been all Mike Evans, but we all know Mike Evans can disappear at any time. So Godwin, I'm going to put him in as a flex. I'm going to put him in as a 2. I'm not going to leave him out of my lineup. You just never know what he can do. I don't know if the Falcons are that for real on defense. I know they're playing better, but can they get it done again? I don't know. I think it's a hump they're getting over defensively, and maybe they slide back into being terrible. The which their record is. So I can't see him sustaining this kind of defensive play. Ronald Jones. A lot of people keep asking me about him on Twitter. He went from playing 45% of the snaps in 2 games to 31 last week. He only had 4 carries, 13 yards against Saints, 2 catches, 1 yard on 4 targets. I mean, every time you buy into him, he either doesn't show up or Bruce Arians changes his mind and throws Peyton Barber in there. So Ronald Jones, I'm dumping him. He's gone. Steelers, Bengals, James Washington. I don't know why I want to love this guy so much, but then when I watch him, I go, why do you like this guy? There's nothing really to like about the Steelers passing game. If Juju's Smith-Schuster's concussion in a knee, Deontay Johnson's concussion, he's banged up too. God, he ought to have the biggest shot for a late season surge. So if you have to, you have to. Jalen Samuels, he averaged 9 receptions in 2 of his last 3 games. Deontay Johnson and Juju inactive this week. I think his share is up. So I'm going to take him. Joe Mixon, no opposing running back has eclipsed double-digit fantasy points against the Steelers since week 5. Each of them have failed to find the end zone. I don't like Mixon. Tyler Boyd, he's going to get Minkah Fitzpatrick coverage in the middle of the field, so forget about him. Raiders and Jets, Derek Carr, he came through more than 250 passing yards, 2 touchdowns. I think he can get it done. Sam Darnold, he broke out week 11. 293 passing yards, 4 TDs against the Reds. It's the Redskins. Now the Raiders are coming to town. They're tied for 7th in fantasy points per game allowed to QB. So Darnold's in for a stiffer test. Hunter Renfrow. The Jets allow a ton of fantasy points to receivers. So I like Renfrow. He's been pretty solid. I guess if you look at his floor week in and week out, he's been solid. I'd lock him in there. Crowder, he's been brilliant. No wideout has been better for the last 3 weeks than Jamison Crowder. It's his favorite. Darnold's got the most chemistry with him. It's his favorite target. 20 points per game since week 8 and a touchdown in each of the 3 contests. So I like him. Ryan Griffin, tight end. Forget Chris Herndon. He's a blip. Ryan Griffin, RG1, baby. He came through in Washington. So this matchup is pretty good, I think. I think he can, he's got 3 solid games in the past 4. I can see him coming through this week against the Raiders. The Giants and the Bears, Allen Robinson. The Giants allow the second most fantasy points to receivers. They've gave up 6 touchdowns to wideouts over the past 3 games. But who is throwing A-Rob the damn ball? Trubisky, you trust Trubisky? You trust Chase Daniel? I don't know. God, that's a question mark. If you got somebody better, you got to go that route. Darius Slayton, he's a guy, every time I play him, he sucks. Every time he's on my bench, he goes off. And I could really use him in the SFB 9 league because I have him, and just every time I go away from him, he goes off. But overall, I'm looking at his complete stat line, the other day. He's been pretty much the brightest spot for the Giants receiving core this season than anybody else. We all know what's going on in New York, but I think he's too inconsistent, man. You don't know what you're going to get when you play him. So if you look at his splits, it's 1 up, 1 down. See wherever you fall in and go from there. Taylor Gabriel, he's got this guy too. He's kind of similar. You don't play him, he goes off, and you play him and he doesn't do anything. But without, I don't know if they targeted him a ton last week. So I think he can kind of put together 4 to 6 catches, 60 to 80 yards, maybe a touchdown. I just kind of see him in that kind of territory. David Montgomery. Now, if there's a week to buy back into Montgomery stock, I think it may be this week, because this kind of happened earlier in the season where everything's set up for the Bears to go back to the running game, and they actually did. So I think the Bears do it again, and they're facing a Giants run defense that's allowed a running back to score or gain at least 100 yards in 5 of their past 6. So, I mean, if there's ever a week to do it, it's got to be this week, right? The quarterback situation, I think, forces the Bears to do that. So I like David Montgomery this week. The Seahawks and the Eagles, baby. This is a pretty tight end centric fantasy game for me, the way I look at it. You got Zach Ertz. I think he's officially back. I know he was giving fantasy owners, some headaches here for the early part, but he's got 11 targets and he's clocked 18 fantasy points in back-to-back weeks. So I like him. Dallas Goedert. I like him even more if there's no Alshon Jeffrey. Goedert is the second best receiver the Eagles have behind Ertz. So his floor, I think, is as high as it can be for a number 2 tight end. Jacob Hollister, tight end for the Hawks. I think you got to lock him up in every league this week. He's coming off back-to-back games against the Bucks and the Niners. I think he's a legit top 10 tight end. 16 targets, 12 catches, 3 touchdowns. It's Russell Wilson's go-to tight end, so you lock him in too. Getting to the quarterback, Carson Wentz, he's been a disappointment, but the Seahawks, they rank 29th in sacks, so I don't see him facing a ton of heat. If he's got time in the pocket, he's going to pick apart the secondary. So I actually do kind of like him this week. Miles Sanders, the Seahawks, like I said, they're 29th in sacks, but they can stop the run a lot better than the pass. So I'm not going to look at Sanders or Jordan Howard with his banged up shoulder. DK Metcalf, Seahawks, he's been producing on a weekly basis. I think he does well again this week against the Eagles. 11 fantasy points and 3 games in a row, 3 touchdowns. I like him, and I'm going to plug him in. Jacksonville, Tennessee. not much to like on this game. I mean, Fournette, yeah, you're going to start him, and Tannehill if you have to. I don't know. I mean, A.J. Brown, a lot of talk about him, getting a lot of questions. If Delaney Walker and Corey Davis are out, I like Brown a bit more. He's going to have more opportunity, and then you got Nick Foles, Jacksonville. The matchup's not great for him, but I think if you've got him and you're going to use him the rest of the season, this is probably the only time you sit him. He's got a nice rest of season schedule. I think he may be okay. He's going to get back into it, but not this week. Titans are tough. Cowboys, Patriots, Dak Prescott. He's been pretty good this year, but his biggest stats are against bad defenses. New England's probably one of the best defenses in the AFC. So the only way to get at New England is to run the ball. So it's going to be, I'm figuring, a heavy Zeke and Pollard kind of game. But Prescott, I know he had a good game against Minnesota 2 weeks ago, but if he can't produce, they're going to run the ball. I'm going to say he's a borderline if you got to play him, or 2-quarterback league kind of thing. Benjamin Watson, tight end on the Patriots. He's been getting some looks here. The Cowboys allow the 5th most fantasy points per game to tight ends. Watson, he's more involved in the Pats offense, last week. So 4 or 5 targets, 52 yards. He may be turning into something. Michael Gallup, no team has allowed fewer fantasy points to receivers than the Pats. So I think they've given up 1 touchdown all season to a wide receiver. So Gallup, Randall Cobb, Belichick's going to focus on facing Amari Cooper and taking him out of the game. Michael Gallup and Zeke. I think it'll be Zeke, of course, but Dak. Cobb can get open underneath. I think he's going to do his best work underneath, drag routes, on a scramble. He's topped 100 yards in each of his past 2 games. It depends on how the game flows for Randall Cobb. I think he's kind of game script dependent. And then Patriots, Sony Walkman, as Paul Charchian likes to call him, and James White. The Cowboys have been more giving to running backs as of late. So I'm looking at Sony gets a TD, minimal rush yards. James White, all the catches out of the backfield, as per usual Patriots running back producers. Packers and Niners, primetime game. I cannot wait for this one. Is this an Aaron Rodgers revenge game? He got passed over by the Niners, 5 on draft day. Probably we should remember that. It was a pretty good draft. But either way, the Niners D is for real. San Francisco allows just 10.9 fantasy points to quarterbacks. They've given up legit points to Kyler Murray in 2 of the past 3 games. So I can't look at Aaron Rodgers and say they're going to shut him down, because I think he can do as much damage as Kyler Murray did, right? So you got to play Rodgers. He's always got upside. He's healthy. If he's got Devontae Adams back, I like it. Jimmy Garoppolo. Now he can light up Arizona. We know that. He's averaged 30 points against the Cardinals. But if you look at his fantasy points per game over the other 8 contests, 13.3. So the Packers have held quarterbacks to an average of 13.1 over their last 2. So I'm going to fade Garoppolo. Tevin Coleman, Green Bay. I think you can always run on Green Bay. They've surrendered an average of nearly 30 fantasy points and 3 touchdowns to running backs. So you can run on them all day. Deebo Samuel, he's been a hot question all week on Twitter. Tons of Deebo Samuel talk. He's produced back-to-back weeks of 19 or more fantasy points. You got to love that, right? He's averaged 15.6 per game in that span. And what I really love about him is that he's got 11 and 10 for targets. So the Packers allowed an average of 115 receiving yards to opposing leading receivers over the past 2 weeks. I love Deebo Samuel. Now, if there's, let's chop it in 2 spots. Let's say with Emmanuel Sanders, do you like Samuel? Yes, absolutely. because I think you can move him around and you can run him underneath. You can drag route. You can play him on the sideline, out of the slot, underneath. And I think he can chew the Packers up all day there. Now, if there's no Emmanuel Sanders and you're going to line him up out wide, he's probably going to get Jari Alexander, and it'll probably be Alexander on him all night. I still think he can get loose. I don't know. I really like him. I think he's steadily improved, and I think he can do damage. Ross Dwelley in place of Kittle. Kittle may or may not play. Got to keep an eye on that all week. Keep your alerts dialed in on your phone and your volume up, because if there is no George Kittle, I think Ross Dwelley is a decent spot. I think you're absolutely going to start him. You're dying for a tight end. Tight ends are tough in fantasy to come by. So with Dwelley, 6 targets per game in place of the injured Kittle over the past 2 weeks. So you got to like him there. He's found the end zone twice, but no defense has been worse at defending the tight end position than the Packers. They're allowing tight ends at least 11 plus fantasy points. So lock him in. Ravens, Rams. Oh my dear God. I cannot wait for this game. Unfortunately, it's got to be on Monday Night Football. How is this broadcast going to go with Booger McFarland? Remember originally he said Lamar Jackson, the league, I don't even remember the exact words. It's on Twitter. Just type it in. You'll find it. Something along the lines that they're not going to do him any favors if any team drafts him and plays him at quarterback. They should convert him to a wide receiver. And now we get to listen to Boog and Tess call this game awful. I'm not listening to that crap. So you know what you do? You dial up Westwood 1 and you get Kevin Harlan on the call, maybe Boomer Esiason. They have a couple different people doing games. Sometimes it's different when I listen to it on the radio. Or you dial up WBAL in Baltimore. You listen to the Ravens broadcast. If you're out west, LA, you dial in your local Rams broadcast. Don't listen to these jokers on ESPN. They are garbage. It's like you're listening to a WWE wrestling match. Any player makes a catch for a first down maybe, and Tessitore is screaming like Ric Flair just somersaulted off a cage with a chair, and knocked out Dusty Rhodes. It's insane. It's awful. I cannot stand that broadcast. So sync it up, stream it off your phone, pipe it into your entertainment center, whatever you got to do. Don't listen to that broadcast. They suck. Anyway, sorry. Apologize. Get derailed there. Rams and Ravens. Jared Goff, done. For God's sake, don't play this guy. He is off. I mean, he's going to be in the cut list later, but I hope you still steered clear him the last 6 weeks. 6 fantasy. Jared Goff has scored 6 fantasy points or fewer in 3 of his past 5 games. What do you think the Ravens are going to do to him? The Ravens have held their last 2 opponents from the quarterback position below double digits, of course, and combined for an average of 7. The Ravens backfield with Marcus Peters, no joke. So he goes home, kind of a revenge game too on the Rams. This is going to be a good match. I don't know who Goff is going to throw to. I don't know how they're going to run against the Ravens. Maybe it's a letdown game for the Ravens because I don't know how they can keep rolling this hot. But they're getting it done. Lamar Jackson's hot. He's getting it done. You're obviously going to lock him in at a quarterback spot. Receivers for the Ravens, it's Marquise Brown, Hollywood or bust, and you know what happens. I don't have to tell you. If you play him, he's only going to get you 2 to 5 points. If you bench him, he's going to go off. He's going to have 27 points, whatever the case. Don't shoot the messenger. Willie Snead, he gets 1 or 2 looks a game. Seth Roberts, he had a touchdown last week. I don't see him repeating that performance. He could absolutely just disappear. Offensively for the Ravens, you're always going to lock in Mark Andrews, and you're going to lock in Mark Ingram, Lamar Jackson, and those are your big 3 fantasy-wise for the Ravens for me. The Ravens defense, I'd plug them in this week. That's a good play. But primetime, you never know how primetime goes. It's a different kind of animal when these teams are playing on, national TV, Sunday night, Monday night. So it's going to be a kick-ass game. I can't wait to see it. Temper your expectations for Rams players and don't go overboard with Ravens hype, but just buy into your 3 locks on the Ravens and you should be golden. Woo! I'm going to lose my damn voice. I apologize. We need to talk about some players that need to get fired.
Screw you! You're fired! You're fired! Whoa! You're fired! You're fired!
Hey, we're going to have to make some tough decisions this week. Are you ready to make some tough decisions? And I'm going to start it right off the bat. We're going to get into a tough one here. Mitch Zimmer is going to hate me. My man Mitch, but I'm sorry. Tom Brady. I know you cannot drop a Hall of Fame quarterback, right? Everybody has owned him. But listen, Brady hasn't topped 285 in his last 4 games. 4 touchdowns for Brady? This is a 6-time Super Bowl champ. But I think he's a fantasy bust this season, man. 14 touchdown passes in 10 games. He's got a great matchup in Week 15 against Cincinnati. So for fantasy playoffs, oh yeah, absolutely, I love him, right? But the offense, for me, for the Patriots, fantasy-wise, it's just not where I don't trust it. I don't know what I like out of that backfield. I don't know what I like about the receivers. Let me just give you some hard stats, and you're not going to like these. Brady has thrown fewer touchdown passes than Kirk Cousins, Daniel Jones, Derek Carr, and Jacoby Brissett. All of whom are currently being started in fewer leagues than Brady. So I'm going to cut him this week. I apologize, Mitch. Please don't beat me up for that. Marlon Mack for the Colts. Everybody owns Mack, 100% ownership, right? Hand surgery, huge blow for fantasy owners. I just can't see him being trusted once he's back. Once he's back, does this running back by committee rear its head again and they're all splitting time just to keep him healthy? I think if you're in a league where you're spending fab money, you might as well hold on to that and use it for targeting somebody else. I told you it's going to be tough. Tough decisions. Ravens receiver Marquise Brown.
Ooh, here we go.
I said it before. Every time you play him, he doesn't show up. Every time you bench him, he destroys it. He kills it. Monster game. You don't need that kind of inconsistency this late in the season if you're trying to make a run for the playoffs. And when you get into the playoffs, would you start Brown in the playoffs? Check out his rest of the season schedule. Check out his fantasy playoff schedule. 49ers in week 13, Bills in week 14. Are you going to trust him in those 2 games? I'm not. So I'm cutting him. Make some room. Get somebody else that can get you over the hump. Juju Smith-Schuster. I know that's probably one of the biggest names, man, but if it's a knee injury and he misses week 12 or beyond, let's say he gets back on the field week 14 or 13, are you going to trust him going into the fantasy playoffs? No. So I'm getting rid of him. And then obviously we just talked about the Rams, Jared Goff. He gone. Double he gone, because there is no way I'm going to go to the playoffs with Goff facing the Seahawks in week 14, Cowboys in week 15, and 49ers in week 16. So forget it. Those would be my top guys. Oh, one last bonus. Antonio Brown. I swear to God, if any of you are holding Antonio Brown on your team right now, hit pause on this podcast and go dump his ass. He gone. You don't need him. No organization is going to take his drama right now. The circus, it's done. He's out. Just like Dez Bryant. You ever go through your waivers and you see Dez Bryant? You're like, what the hell why is he still on there? He is not coming back. Get over it. That's all I got for the Sunday short list. Get rid of these guys. Get them out of here. Let's jump into the Pick'em segment.
What kind of horse y'all got? Light horse. What kind of horse y'all got? Light horse. What kind of horse y'all got? Light horse. Y'all boys ready? Yeah. Y'all boys ready? Yeah. No. Y'all boys ain't ready? Shit. Somebody light me up. Boom.
It's picks. Time to do some picks. These are the picks that I do in my family Pick'em League. Colts, Texans. Texans favored by 3.5. Give me the Texans. Browns and Dolphins. Cleveland favored by 10.5 over the Dolphins. The Dolphins are the worst team, one of the worst teams in the NFL, but they are the best looking bad team that I've seen in quite a while, and I'm not buying that. So I'm going Dolphins. Lions and Redskins. Redskins plus 3.5. Jeff Driscoll led Detroit. Yeah, give me the Lions. Darius Slay on defense is the brightest spot in the backfield for them defensively. Denver and Buffalo. Bills favored 4.5. Give me the Bills. You know what? Whoa! Reverse. Give me Denver. Nobody's picking Denver. That's fine. But if you look at this game, it's going to have to be by 3 points, right? The Broncos almost, they were up 20-0 in Minnesota on the road. They're going to get their asses chewed. They're going to look at some tape. They're going to come out to this game pretty damn focused after blowing that 20-0 lead. I don't think they win this game, but they got to keep it by close and keep it like to 3. So for the Bills to win by 4.5, I'm going to go gut. My gut says go the other way. Tampa Bay and Atlanta, same spread here. 4.5 for the Falcons. I like that. Eagles and Seahawks. Eagles by 1.5? No way. Panthers and Saints. Saints by 9.5. I will take that. Steelers and Bengals. Bengals plus 6.5. Give me Pittsburgh all day. Raiders and Jets. Jets by plus 3.5. Sorry. Give me the Raiders. Giants and Bears. Bears are favored by 6.5. What if there's no Trubisky, right? I'm going Giants. That quarterback situation is just awful for the Bears. Titans and Jags. Titans are favored by 3.5. I like the Titans. Cowboys and Patriots. Patriots are favored by 6.5. I'll take New England. Packers and Niners. Niners are favored by 3.5. Oh, who do I pick here? I gotta go Green Bay because I really think you can flip a coin. Either of these teams could win. Any given Sunday, they play it 100 times. They 50-50. But I'm going to say either way, this is a 3-score game. I don't think you can come out of this over 3. Ravens and Rams. Rams are plus 3.5. I'm going to go Baltimore. And let's lock that up.
Yo! Saddle up! Lock and load! Purple rain, purple rain. Purple rain, purple rain.
That's going to wrap up the show today. Thank you very much for listening and supporting the show. Drop a comment, give the episode a share, hit us up. I can't even talk. My throat is killing me. Hit us up on Twitter. Anything you want to hear on the podcast, we'll talk about it. Anything you want to talk about on Twitter, we'll talk about it. teams, lineups, questions, NFL, fantasy, real life, it doesn't matter. Anytime. So as always, good luck to everyone this week in your fantasy leagues. Check back for next week's episode. And for the Thanksgiving week, I'm going to have a very special episode with my man, Dennis Kulatzos. I am on his show every Thursday, and we talk about the NFL and the fantasy landscape. But we're going to do a little something different here this upcoming week for the holiday. And we are going to talk about some NFL games, of course. We're going to talk a little fantasy, but we're going to talk about some gym life stuff, working out, weightlifting, diet. The holidays come, you eat like a pig, you gorge, bye-bye belt, and you watch all the games all day, and you just get fat. So it always rolls around, and you say, man, after New Year's, I got to get in the gym. I got to do something. I got to exercise. I got to do something to get healthy. Well, Dennis and myself are gym rats. We've been in the gym. We love it. We love working out. So we're going to get together and talk a little fun gym, weightlifting, diet kind of pod. And if you're a newbie or these are things that you have thought about, you want to listen to this podcast because it's going to be fun, casual conversation style. And it's not hardcore. We're not a bunch of meatheads, in there powerlifting 500 pounds like a bunch of dumbasses. This is just fun talk about getting healthy and how to get started. So check that out. That's going to be coming up next week. And if there's anything else, hit us up anytime on Twitter at FantasyWireHQ. And on Sundays, we always do the Live Wire Sunday, where that's live lineup advice all the way up till kickoff. And that is anything. Let it rip, man. So until then.
Yeah, all right, this press conference is over.
Go away.
No, it's over, Phil. It's over.
That wraps up today's episode. For even more fantasy football content, find Frank on Twitter at FantasyWireHQ and online at thefantasyfootballwire.com. Be sure to tune in next week, and thanks for listening.